My name's Lucy and this is my YouTube channel, my little space on the internet where I can come to you and share all the things that I like to make, create, design and things like that. So for those of you that don't know me, I am a designer on a well-known TV programme here in England called Sewing Street, and on there I take my designs for all of the bags that I like to create. I live in Lincolnshire in England. I have a husband, 2 boys and the most wonderfulest dog in the world called, I can't say her name too loud because she's over there keeping her eye, and if I say her name she'll be trotting over here and getting involved straight away. So yeah, just one to watch there. I'm here today because I want to make something for a lady that I've come across more recently by the name of Eleisha, and Eleisha runs her own YouTube channel over in Australia called Lovely Day Knits, and I'm going to be sure to put her links into the description, and hopefully we can pop something on the slide too so you can find out a little bit more about her and why I've been so attracted to her channel. Now I watch a lot of YouTube channels all about knitting as I'm sat on my sofa doing my knitting, which is my absolute favourite sport in all of the world. I do tend to sort of flick between different designers and find out what they're up to across the world, learning lots of new tips, tricks as we go. But Eleisha really struck a chord with me, and I'm not entirely sure why, but when I first came across her, there was something about her personality, her persona through the camera. It felt like she was talking to you, talking to me, and I really like people that can do that. I think it's really, really clever. So I've been watching her journey. Then let's skip ahead a little bit. I applied for a test knit with Inga of Knitting Traditions, somebody who I have fangirled for the longest time. I applied for her test knit and I was fortunate enough to be picked. I was one of the very few in England that was picked, so that felt quite mind-blowing already. But I got involved in her test knit and I made the Freya knit. Now interestingly, this is the Freya knit, although it has got an adaptation. It's got all these pretty cables down the front, it's got cables down the raglan, and then it has cables that run down the side of the sweater too. The first one that I made was actually in a different colour. This was a summer version. You can make this knit in many other styles, winter looks, etc., different colours. But this is the summer version that I chose to knit, and this is knitted with the Knitting for Olive. But the first one that I knitted was in a really soft brown colour. It was beautiful. Well, a chat group was set up for the test knitters, and obviously we're chatting away, talking about any sort of areas that we needed a bit of support with, sharing our progress, things like that. And I saw somebody's make and I thought, oh my goodness, that's Eleisha. That's Eleisha who I watch on her channel. I had no clue. So I messaged her and we were knitting the same version in the same colours, and it looked the same, although on her 10 times, 1,000 times better than it does on me. But yeah, maybe I'm just fangirling again. Anyway, so we got chatting, have a bit of correspondence, and a couple of weeks ago I watched her latest YouTube video, which is all about what it's like to live in a tiny home. Again, I'll mention that I will pop the video in here so you can have a look here, wherever it needs to be. And Hannah's reaching for a very squeaky toy, just to let you know. And if she starts squeaking it, we'll try and mute it out. But this is real life and she's happy, and that's all I'm bothered about. Anyway, in Eleisha's video, she was talking about what it's like to live in a tiny home. And when we're talking tiny, she lives in like a caravan. And it's really, really interesting because as a crafter, you will know we have stacks of stuff, don't we? So where do you keep all of this stuff in a tiny home? So she does a walkthrough and she shows you, but she talks about some of her storage issues and solutions, and her lovely husband made her this beautiful unit that stood in the corner of her room that she could put all of her yarn on. And then she decided that what I could do with is doing this like little wall hanger that I could put all my bits and bobs in it, and I'll have like a little place to live. So then we watched her making it and I wanted to die. I wanted to die. I messaged her straight away saying that just gave me the heebie-jeebies. She pulled out her old sewing machine. That was more than dirty. I'm sorry, Eleisha, that was more than dirty. And then she sat it on her bed, directly onto her bed, with her leg up like this, and started sewing. And I thought, I hope she's got a first aid kit nearby because I think she might well need one. And she made this little wall thing, and she was pleased with it and all the rest of it. But anyway, I contacted her saying, look, Eleisha, I would just love to make you something. And how would you feel if I went ahead and designed you something that's perhaps a little more fit for purpose? You said, oh, Lucy, please, I'm working with what I've got here, and I really wanted to work on a table, but the porch was being done and all the rest of it. So I'm working within my means, but you know what? I would be so grateful to you. So that's what we're here to do today. I am going to make Eleisha, with all of my love, a nice little tidy organiser to go on a wall to put all of her bits and bobs in. So we're talking about anything to do with her knitting, really. So she has lots of cables, wires, little tiny notions. She's got little crochet hooks and things like that. The little natty bits that kind of build up over time. She wants a place for those. Now we're working in a restricted area because the place it needs to go, actually she has a machine that sits next to it, because you'll know when you watch her videos that she has a feeding tube in her nose, and that connects pretty much all the time to this machine. So we've got a limited amount of space to work with them. I get a good grasp of what her colour palette's like, and I'm going to push the boundaries just a tiny bit, because I think if we're going to do this, we've got to do it right. Now if I was doing it for me, I'd be going, let's go big or go home, but you know, it's not for me, and I've got to be sensible. So I'm hoping that I get the tone of this just right for you, Eleisha. So the palette that I was going to work with was this, the Muted palette. This is the one that she has seen. Very nice, if I do say so myself, but I've abandoned it. I'm sorry. Instead, we're going to go with the most beautiful Anna Maria Horner. I adore this fabric. I've been selling it a while now, and this is the last of my stock. And I'm going to go in and I am going to design off the hoof, on the hoof, going to go with it, and we're going to put these fabrics together. This is a canvas fabric, these are quilting cottons, and that's going to be our colour palette. So if you're in for a ride and you want to watch me design on the go, please do stay with me. As always, if you enjoy my content and you get something from today, please do consider giving me a like and a subscribe to my channel to find out about all the things I'm up to. But in the meantime, let's get on. So to get started, the first thing I need to do is think about the size of the panel that we're going to be making. And the size of that, or at least the width, would be decided by the width of the hanger that I'll be using to make this hang up when it comes to completion. So I've pulled out the hanger that I would choose to use, this sort of velvet soft touch one, and I know that this will be sitting at the upper edge, and I'm going to need to allow a little bit of space either side to allow for all seam allowances. So I've got that measurement, and that was then able to tell me how wide I wanted this panel to be. So here's the hanger, so we can see that there's the hanger, and this is the total width that I've cut. The width of this panel is, and it's just a rough cut, was 20 inches wide. Now what I needed to do next was to load it, fuse it onto that H640. Now I've cut two of these already, one of each. One will be the very back piece, and one's going to be the front piece that we're going to see. So on this front piece, we're going to treat them all separately. It's all been fused together, but now we need to sew them together to keep them nice and firm. Now how you sew them together is entirely up to you, but for me, what I'm going to do is I've just taken a diagonal line, no particular orientation. I'm just going to rotate it slightly, and I'm going to use my chalk wheel. Now I did say I was going to use my friction pens right back at the start, but of course on a fabric like this, that friction pen isn't going to show so much. So instead I'm going to use my chalk wheel, and it'll just drop out of here. And all we do is we go up, and it drops that chalk as we go, and it leaves me a line, and I will be able to sew those lines into place. When I've done them all in this direction, I'm then going to rotate my ruler, and then we'll do some cross intersections like so. So just to give you an idea, it's going to look like that, and you can set these all out as far apart as you like. I've chosen 4 inches. So my next big decision is which thread to use. Now I'm going to be using a Tex, well, I would normally use a Tex 40, and this would be my go-to thread. This is what I like to use in all of my bag making, but it's going to disappear. I'm not going to see it at all. So again, in for a penny, in for a pound. We're going big and bold. Hope you like it, Eleisha. Get your sunglasses on, because we're going fluorescent orange. Well, it's like an orangey pink colour, and that's going to make sure it really stands out, which will give it great interest. Now don't be scared. because although we're putting a lot of this onto the fabric, we're then going to have pockets put on top. So we're going to start losing some of that thread straight away again. Let's get the machine set up. We'll draw some more lines in and we'll get sewing. Now I'm just going to work on repeat to get all those lines in. Now working in the opposite direction. Trimming as we go. Got one line in, I just need to go back and do the ruler for the other 4-inch lines. There's times when we don't understand why things have happened the way they have, but I've just discovered that this thread is not gripping, and I don't know why, but rather than mess around too much, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull, see, look, I'm just going to pull everything out. I'm going to get a different thread and we're just going to go again. And it will be absolutely fine. It will just be something to do with the thread. So we're going to make this all right again, and then we're just going to go again. But I'm not going to delete this out of the video because I think it's really important you understand that sometimes these things do happen. I like to think that I'm very skilled in this area of bag making, but sometimes things just go wrong and there's no answers. Okay, so all of the lines are now in, and I went back with my Mara Tex 40 in a white thread on a stitch length of 3.5. So that's the only change made there. When that was done, I went in and I just straightened up all my edges. So now I can give you some measurements. It is still a rectangle, and the width of this rectangle is now 19 inches wide, and the depth currently sits at 20, just shy of 28 inches. I still may take some off the drop of this, but I'm just going to wait till this builds a little bit more. Can you see that I put a line in here? This is the midway point from left to right, and I've done that in just so as I've got some balance when I'm thinking about where I'm going to place some pockets. The first pockets I'm going to start with, based on Elisha's needs, is I'm thinking about all those cables she had. I've drawn a line 4 inches up from that bottom edge here. So this is just going to be a baseline for me to work to. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in quite a deep pocket, maybe the deepest of them all, that's going to run from left to right. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this fun, because I'm dying to use this vinyl, is I'm actually going to do half of it vinyl and then half of it in the Anna Maria in one of the fabrics. And I'm going to attach it by sewing the two fabrics together. I'm going to have one long zip that runs along the top with two zip pulls that will open outwards. So when you pull them closed, they'll hang nicely together. So aesthetically, it'll look really cute. And then when it comes to dividing them, I'm going to do something later on probably that goes all the way up where there's some binding or something like that. Yet to be decided. But what we get is we're going to get these horrible joins that we're not going to want to see. So we'll find a way to disguise it all. So the fabrics that I'm going to be using are, for this pocket, this Anna Maria Horner. Isn't it gorgeous? Chosen this because it is called piecework, and it is there to simulate that idea of English paper piecing. So that'll be on one side, and then I'm going to use this vinyl on the other, and this vinyl is going to show through and we'll be able to see that grid marks. But this will be really handy for when you're putting your cables in there and you want to be able to see what you are doing. So I have my pieces cut. So I've got two pieces for the pocket on the right hand side because it will need a lining, and then I've got one piece of the vinyl. They are 6.5 inches deep by half of the width, so that is in this case 9.5 inches wide per piece. The next thing I want to do is actually join this interface panel to the edge of this vinyl piece. So all I'm going to do is clip it into place. Let me get my pins, my clips should I say. I'm going to clip it, and then I will sew it at 1/4 inch seam allowance along this edge. Now we do need to be really careful with our vinyls. We can't really be ironing these. So when that's ironed into place, I'm going to flip it all over to the right, keeping this vinyl seam allowance over to that side out of the way. So I'm back at the machine. I'm going to sew at 1/4 inch seam allowance. I've got a regular stitch length of 2.5, and I am going to reverse at each end just to lock those stitches in. reversing at the end. And then I'm going to finger press that seam allowance towards the fabric, and then I'm going to rotate, and I'm just going to top stitch just to make sure those seams stay out of the way over here. So to top stitch, I'm just going to turn that up to 3.5. And we'll work our way down. My machine is telling me that it is nearly out of bobbin thread, so I shall have to sort that out next. But this is how this is looking for now. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start thinking about getting that long zip into position. So now we need to get these two zip pulls onto this one continuous piece of zip tape. I'm going to cut my zip tape so it's actually wider than the unit we are cutting. This will make the whole job a lot easier. So snip that out of the way. Now the easiest way to get the zip pull on if you don't have a jig is to separate the zip, go to one of the zip tapes and cut away some of the coils. When that's done, take the nose end of your zip, the zip pull, and slide it onto the complete zip side, so this right hand side just here, and bring it down those teeth like so. And then when it's at the same position there as where the cut is, click it into place and pull it into position, and that one's on. Now we're going to go to the opposite end, open up the zip tape, there we go, and now I'm going to do the same by cutting away some of the zip coils. And we look for those later because I'll be across the room now. Back to the nose of the zip, in onto the zip tape, wiggle it down until we're roughly in the same spot again, click it into place and pull. And there you go, they're both in, so it will open in two directions now. And don't they look cute? Two little butterflies. So all we now need to do is attach this to the upper edge of that pocket. So here's my pocket. Now if you prefer, you can use some zip tape. So this is a very narrow zip tape. It's about 1/8 of an inch deep. Let me grab mine. So here it is. Grab the end and you're going to just place it to the upper edge of your material. All the way along. Nice and steady. And then we tear it at the other end to release it. We don't cut it. And by tearing it, we should have an easier time in peeling one of those layers away. It's not a given, but it sometimes helps. There we go. There we go. I've grabbed it. Just leaving that tape behind. And now all I need to do is place the edge of this with the zip tape down, the coils down, and we can just place that on the upper edge like so. And that will just help it adhere whilst we take it to the machine. Now if you want to, you can pull those coils, sorry, the zip pulls away and off if you wanted to, or you could add the pulls later on. It's entirely up to you. I'm actually just going to pull mine out of the way as I reach them, but I'm going to sew all the way along, and then we're going to return to complete this side of the pocket. So that's in place, but we've got to do something slightly different now. This pocket here needs to be lined so that when we open the pocket we don't see this ugly side. Now we would normally just sew it to the top, stitch it and flip it over. However, what we've got is a seam that's already been folded over here. So what I'm actually going to do, remember we're designing on the go here, so I'm having to think as I go, and I've never done this before, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this to the ironing board and pre-press that into position. When that's pressed, I'm then going to line it up evenly, like so, and then I'm going to sew all the way along so that when I flip it back onto itself, that raw edge will be tidying away, and then we can just do a stitch just next to this existing stitch just to hold it in place, and it'll look like it is meant to be there. So that's been pressed, so now I'm aligning it as best I can, really looking at this edge just down here, and I'm going to actually just pin it this time because I don't want it to wiggle at all. And then I will sew that same edge. This is fun. I'm enjoying myself. Okay, so now I'm going to sew that. So I'm ready. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start at this end, and I'm just going to, with my fingers, ease the vinyl down onto the tape. And I'm just going to, with a longer stitch, so I've got a stitch length of 3.5 now, I'm going to work my way along, teasing it downwards as I go so I can get it nice and flat. And we're going to do a continuous row of stitching now. Move those zip teeth, the zip pulls if you need to. So we can move those down out the way. And then we're going to continue all the way down onto the blue. Oh, look what I've done. That's not cool. I told you I would need that unpicker today, didn't I? Let me grab it. So I got this caught. It's because it wasn't pinned into place or clipped. So I took my eye off the ball. I was so focused on that vinyl, I didn't keep an eye on this. Not to worry, no harm done. Other than that lovely one continuous row of stitching. Didn't necessarily happen in the end. Not to worry. Let's go again. And reverse to lock. And then I'm going to just sew this final edge that I mentioned before. So I'm just going to sew next to it. Okay, let's take it back to the desk and take a look. So that is the pocket done, but now we've got to work out how we're going to fix it into place. Remember as well, this whole pocket when put together is still too long, but we're going to deal with that at the end. It's easy to have everything a bit too long and trim it down at the end. Now this pocket system that I'm doing right here, I want it to have depth so that when Eleisha fills it, she can really stuff these pockets if she wants to. So I'm giving you permission, Eleisha, to get all of your stuff in here. So the way we're going to create the depth now is the way we're going to actually fix this top edge. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose our point up here in just a moment. We're going to flip, let me just close this up a little bit, and we're going to flip the whole unit upwards, and we're going to fix the tape down directly onto the green fabric so that when we've sewn it will just flick back on itself and it'll be affixed in place. And then all we need to do is think about the bottom of this bag. So what we need to do is two things now. One, decide our line that this is going to sit at. Well, that's not too difficult because we already did this line right back at the start, if you recall. Starting to disappear now, so I'm going to pull out my chalk pen again, and I'm just going to take a quick measurement of how high this is. So we've got a measurement that is currently 7 inches, and I want to give it depth, so I need to do a line that is smaller than that. So let me get this line back in again so you can still see it, making sure it's nice and straight as we go. That's ideally where the bottom of the bag is going to go. And now I'm going to measure up, what did I just say that was? 7, 6.5. Now that is luckily the depth of this entire ruler. So I'm going to put that in just like so. If it ends up slightly out, it really doesn't matter. What we need is straight. That's all we're looking for right now. So we've got our line that we can get that in with. Before we can do anything though, what we need to think about is how do we plan on finishing this edge? So what I've decided I'm going to do is I'm going to use shop bought bias binding. So it's already folded and pre-pressed. If you wanted to, you could take your own fabric and make this, but I'm going to go for a bit of speed and I'm going to cut a length that is wider than the width of the whole unit. Again, just to make things slightly easy, or easier should I say. And ultimately what we're looking to do is wrap all of this around the bottom edge and sew it into place. But we want to do it as tidily as possible. So the way I'm going to do it is I'm actually going to work from the wrong side of this panel. And I'm going to lay this on top. And I'm going to line up all those edges. And I'm going to sew in this stitch all the way along. So I'm going to do that as step 1. So I'm not going to pin it, but I would recommend that you clip. I'm just going to guide it in as I go, working along. And now we're going to flip this up, over and around until all these edges meet. And we're just going to give it a very gentle iron into place. Okay, so that's all been ironed, as we can see, and I actually put a bit of that tape between it just to start holding it into place. Now what I've then done is I've sort of pre-placed it onto the fabric to make sure I'm happy with the width, just because I've got these labels sewn in, and I've lined up and I've made a mark at the top and the bottom so I can see where it needs to meet to go down the middle, and that's where I want the placement to end up. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop a bit of tape to this upper edge, and I do need to keep this one really close to the edge, and then I can go ahead and flip my whole unit upwards, pin it, and then sew it into place, making sure that I'm lining up those centre marks as I want them. So I'm just removing this tape again. It's given me a good run for my money today. There we go. So I'm watching this midpoint here, and I'm going to flip it up, make sure it lines up. There we go. Oh, there we go. So all I did there was I just made sure my line is all matching up, and we are in. Tape wants to come off just at this end. Just need to be a bit more forceful with it. So now I just need to sew along this edge here. So I did 2 rows of stitching in the end just to make sure this edge didn't sort of flap around over time. So now I'm going to pull it down. There we go. And I'm going to make sure this edge lines up like so. Now, remember I wanted to create a bit of depth, and at the minute if I pull it down it's going to make it very flat like so, and we don't want that. So I'm going to reassess, because we want that bit of waft there. And then I'm going to pin it into place along this edge here. So I'll pin all the way along, and then I will sew this lower edge. Now before I do the vinyl side, what I do need to do is quickly take this over to the iron, ease this back and make sure I get rid of that line now just underneath that pocket, else it will stay forevermore. So I've removed that line now, so I can go back and carry on pinning this into place. And then when that's sewn, all we need to think about then is how in the world will we stop this from going into 2? Well, in theory it doesn't really matter if we have one continuous pocket, but I do think it'd be nice to separate it. So what we can do if we wanted to, we could, let's do it now so I can show you. We could, before we stitch this edge down, in theory, get some more tape, wrap it around and stitch that with that previous line. So i.e. flip this out and then pop that down there and flip it under. That would divide it very nicely, in fact. I do quite like that idea. Or you can just run some stitches over this and it will stop you being able to move that zip. So that's what we're going to do for today. We are just going to sew across, down and lock it off. So we'll have 2 rows of stitching, one close to the edge here and one close to the edge just here. Okay, let's take a look, shall we? So our big pocket is done. Look, so that has done the job. So we can't go and encroach on each other's pockets space any further. We're tidy on the bottom, it's all sealed in, that's all nice. So all we need to do is baste in these ends now. Always best in this case probably to turn it over and work from the wrong side so you can see where you are and just stitch within your seam allowance, whatever that might be. When it comes to the finish edges, for me it will be 1 centimetre. So I am going to complete by sewing in those 2 ends and then just trimming down the edges, and then we'll start moving up this panel. So I've sewn it in place. All I now need to do is just trim it back to that edge that I sewed earlier on. Do it on both sides. Get rid of any waste. Flip it over and that section is all complete and I think it looks really smart. Can't wait to see it in use. Ah! Okay, so now we've got those pockets in place, we need to think about what happens further up here. Now, Eleisha, like me, is a knitter, and I am thinking that she will need a space like I do for our double pointed needles, the odd pin when it gets lost, a crochet hook. We need a crochet hook. When we drop a stitch, we'll go in with a crochet hook just to pull up the stitches that we need. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a space up here now that is for those long, thinner items. It could be a ruler, anything like that really. So this is going to be quite a simple strip of pockets that we're going to make along here. First thing I need to do now is draw in that baseline again to make sure we're always working straight. And what I would like to see is space between these pockets. It will allow the eye just to rest a little bit, so it will look, so it won't look overcrowded basically when it's hung up on Eleisha's wall. If it makes a grade, of course. It could be. She hates it. Let's be positive though, people. Let's be positive. Right, this time I'm going to go in with one of my other favourite fabrics by Anna Maria, and that is this one. This is also from the Piecework collection. I think it will look beautiful along here. So all I'm going to do this time is I'm going to cut a strip of fabric that is as tall as it wants to be for interchangeables. Now to do that, I've brought in my set of pins just to give me a bit of a rough idea, and so we can test the idea later on. So it wants to be, we need to be able to see our pins. We're going to lose about a centimetre space here, 3/8 of an inch in terms of seam allowance, and then we want to be able to see the tips of whatever we're working to. So if I now measure this space, that's about 4 inches that we want, but we're also going to have some seam allowance. So if I said 5 inches, we'll lose a bit from the top and we'll lose a bit from the bottom, and it should pull it down to in the region of 4 inches. If I'm dissatisfied, then I can quickly go back in and just change my seam allowances. So all I'm going to do now is cut one piece of fabric that is actually 8 inches deep because of how I'm going to be constructing it, by just over the width of the fabric, which, to remind you, is 19 inches. So I'll cut it at 20 inches by 8 inches deep, and then we're going to take those long edges here, put them right side to right side, and we're going to sew one long seam. So let's go ahead and do that. So here is my panel that I've just cut, and I did apply some medium weight interfacing, and I've pressed it together along this long edge. So now I'm just going to sew a 1 centimetre seam allowance across these edges, and then when that's sewn, I'm going to turn it all through like it's a long sock through one of these ends. So that's sewn, so now I just need to work my way through to turn it through to the other side, and then I'm going to press it, but I am not going to press it so that the seam line is on the edge, because we don't need to see it. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure it sits in the centre like so, and then that will effectively go against the panel, so you'll never see it. So you don't need to worry about it being perfect at the top or the bottom. So we can just iron that down so it's nice and flat, and then we can think about placement. So I've temporarily just laid it on top of the panel, and like I say, I will be sewing at a 1 centimetre seam allowance about here, and then a further line down. Before it's all in place, I will also sew 2 lines to the top here, both being top stitch a longer stitch length, and it will just give it some visual interest and make it a little bit stronger. So when my tip is in, this is what you will see. Now, if you think that that is not enough vision space, then obviously you can just go back in and take a little bit more of a seam allowance, thus reducing the depth of this panel, and then go back to this position. I'm happy with that though, so I'm now going to pin it into place and get it to the sewing machine. So now I'm looking to place this onto the base unit. So I can just pin that into place to hold. Just use a few pins. And I will be sewing the sides down by flipping it over and sewing from the reverse as we did before. And we'll sew those 2 lines in at that lower edge. Then what we're going to need to do is sew a sequence of different depth slots to put all of our bits and pieces into. We've got this centre line here, so let's use that to our advantage once again and draw the line in. Let me just get my ruler. So I'm just going to pop that line in. So we've got one right in the centre. And then if I pop a pin through that, if you are using it for needles or crochet hooks where it does really matter how wide things need to be, get your pins, pretend that's sewn, slip it in, and then measure the distance. That's going to be about 1 inch for a smaller pair of pins. So what I'm going to do, oh, this is going to be fun. I'm going to do some 1 inch slots, then I might do some 1.5, and I might just make them a bit wider as I go. I'm going to make this up as I go, quite frankly. So we've got a 1 inch there, turn my ruler, and I'm going to do a 1 inch there, and I'm going to work out, and I might do a 1.5 at that. Let's go back this side, so it's 1.5. So we've got a 1, 1, 1.5, 1.5. Let's get another 1 inch in at this point, I think. So I can't see my line there. The pin's in the way, so that's another 1 inch. So now we've got 4 1 inches, 2 1.5 inch. Let's do 1.5 again then. And then what we can do is we can use this end space as just a bigger pocket. I think that's a nice little mix then, isn't it? 1.5 and 1.5. There we go. So I'm going to sew the end in. I'm going to work across and I'm going to work up. I'm then going to come back to the start. I'm going to repeat sew to hold it in, but then I'm going to sew up by that 1 centimetre. When I get to my 1 centimetre, I'm going to go up, go across a stitch, back down, across, up, across a stitch, back down, repeating all of the way. It's going to take a little while to do that, but slow and steady wins the race. My, that did take me some work, but it was worth the effort. The stitching is really nice. It may not show that well on the camera, but you may need to trust me, it's looking good. So let's have a little try out, shall we? So here's those pins again, just pop them in there. Here's a pen, we can pop that into the 1-inch pocket. Will it fit? It will fit. Equally, the 1.5 inch it's going to go into as well. What else could we put in there? What else would we put in our bag? Oh, there's another pen there. Let's pop another pen in. All the pins that you like them in. I've got a whole packet of them in here. I've got all sorts of things. In fact, should we start filling her up? Look, these are my little doodahs, my little stoppers and things. They're all going to go into these pockets. Not these ones necessarily, but maybe in the next ones that we do. Oh, let's get them in there. No, they're for the cables. We already decided they're for the cables. But I think this is looking great. So we've got something for the bigger items. We've got something for these medium-sized items. I think we need something up this end now that's going to take care of all of our little bits. So we need to consider what that might be. So I have been having a think and a mull. And what I have decided I'm going to do is I'm going to, up here, this top end, as I swoosh it down, going to make pockets of 2 halves. We're going to work with the central line again. And I literally just heard from Eleisha a moment ago. I asked her a few questions like, you know, what would you change if you could change the one you've already done, things like that. So I've got a bit of feedback from her. And to be fair, it's not far adrift from what I was thinking myself it needed really. So what I'm going to do on this half, I'm going to make 2 popper pockets. Those popper pockets will be for those little notions I showed you a moment ago. And we'll be doing flaps on those, on each of them, so that we can put cam snap closures on them so they will be nice and safe away. Then on this side, I'm going to do a big open slip pocket that something like an A5 notebook could perhaps go into, maybe A6, I'm not sure. But I also want to bring in these, which is just a small pair of scissors. And I'm going to do something to make sure that we've always got a pair of scissors to hand by attaching these to a chain so that we know where they are and that's where they belong, and it will always be there for Eleisha when she's desperately looking for scissors like I always am. So the fabrics I'm going to use, I'm going to bring in the third and final Anna Maria that I have for this range. This is all part of the same range as well. We're going to put some of this in just up on this side here. And then on this side, I'm going to bring in this fabric that we used earlier on, and that's going to create a little bit of balance up there. So all I need to do is think about what size I want that pocket to be, and then the rest will follow over here. Now it could be that when I've made this one, I feel like 2 popper pockets might work a little bit like they're going to be long and slim. I won't know till I get there. It could be that it would look better to have 1 long thin popper pocket and 2 smaller popper pockets. So I need to think about that as I go through that design process. So that first pocket has been cut. I've interfaced it again to give it a bit of additional strength. And as before, I'm just going to sew this top edge and then turn it through like it's a sock. So So I have done all this pocket now, and I've pressed it so that the seam line is on the back out of the way. I will do 2 rows of top stitching to keep it in keeping with everything else, but the bottom edge will be sewn in and top stitched when it's put onto those canvas piece. But before I carry on with that, what I want to do is make a keychain for this pair of scissors. Now to do that, I'm going to need 2 parts. I'm going to need the D-ring and the key fob. And I'm going to need to attach a little bit of ribbon to hold this permanently, and it will hang beneath the pocket like so. So just a quick visual, I'm going to be using my bias tape, folding it in half and stitching it. I will thread it through, and that will sit permanently beneath there. And then I will make a chain that will attach to this one, that this can clip onto this end. We'll have a loop here, and that loop will attach to the scissors, so Eleisha can just remove those whenever she wants to use her snips. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I've got a length here, it's probably about 24 inches long. I've ironed it in half, and I'm just going to stitch the sides together. I'm going to rotate it and come down the other side. Now I'm going to trim off a short amount. There is no measurements in this, and I'm going to thread it through, and these scraggy ends here, they're going to get hidden away later on when they get tucked underneath the pocket like so. Now we need to make this piece. I am going to thread this through, possibly a little bit too long. In fact, let's trim that down. It is far too long. Don't know what I was thinking of here, Lucy Pixley. And I'm going to cut it off because I just saw a join. We'll get rid of that join line instead. All I'm going to do is take it end to end, and I'm going to sew straight across the end just there. So that's sewn. Now what we're going to do is we're almost going to twist it the other way around. So if I bring this fob to the top so you can see, and then we're going to twist this like so. It's a bit like it's inside out, but it's going to allow me to open those ends, feed that through, sneak it in and trap it. And then you can either use a rivet or some stitches just to hold in place. So that's done. I've forgotten to add the scissors in. What an actual wally. I meant to feed those into there and then do all of that. Let me do it again. I'm just going to cut it off. It's fine. We've got plenty of length. We already decided that. Let's do it now. Oh, don't we love some real life sewing? This is how designers do have to work though, you know. We have to think out loud all the time with ourselves. So that's going to go down like that. So that's in like so. And then, what was I doing? See, now I got to think in reverse. Thinking. I can't lie, that did test my brains, but we got there in the end. So the scissors are attached, which is what I wanted. And this will just clip onto the hook when it's not in use, so it can be stowed away safely. So let's get all of this now into place. So as before, what we're going to do is we're going to bring ourselves our chalk marker, and we're going to draw ourselves a line. So let's look at the gap that we've got here and simulate it here. So it was 2 inches, so I'm just going to measure 2 inches up from this top edge here. Getting my chalk line again, and that'll be the baseline for us to work from now. I'm going to go and top stitch this line just here, and then I will place that to the edge, just like so, making sure that I tuck this in like so before I sew that bottom edge. So So it's time to pin. So that's all been sewn just on this upper edge. Let's pin this into place, lining up that left edge just down there. Get some pins in just to hold. Like I say, we're going to leave this as a big open pocket. Lots of space to get in there and put something good in there. And then I'm going to tuck my little fob under the edge, tucking it right up out of the way, like so. And I will just pop a little pin in as best I can to hold it. It might be a bit of a pain though. I might just need to just check on that as I sew to make sure it's not moved. But I'll just sew the sides now. I'll go across the bottom and up the side, and we're going to deal with this rough edge later on in the process. I apologise, I had the camera with me but forgot to hit record for that little section there. But there's our pocket with our big open space there. We've got this in here. So now all we need to do is clip that into place. And then these can hang, or they can go into this pocket if Eleisha wants to keep them tucked away still. But they're there as that reminder all the time that she has got snips. Okay, so they are there. So we've got options now in there, just to hang, or will they fit up there? Maybe so, but maybe a little bit ugly. Don't do that, Eleisha. Right, so now we're on to these nitty natty pockets over here. So we need to think about how to do that. I'm just going to take this out for now, this little clip, and I'm just going to stow it away so I don't forget that that needs to go with it. So I'll pop that in there. Doing its job, earning its keep. So we now need to think about these pockets here and doing some snap pockets. I'm going to do what would appear to be another big slip pocket here. But on the outer piece, so this is effectively, well, it's one piece of fabric, but it could be two joined together. The outer piece, I'm going to work with that separately first to create a sequence of snap pockets just here first. When that is done, I'm then going to line it to the full size of this, so it'll become that slip pocket to simulate that. So we'd have two big slip pockets, two popper pockets, and then that will complete the front of the bag. Let's get to it. So far I've cut two pieces of fabric. I actually need two of these ones cutting, but I'm just going to focus on the top at the minute. So this is going to be, I mean, it's bigger than it needs to be right now because I'm going to trim it down later, but this is almost like the base for us to put those pockets on, the popper pockets that we want. I've cut a piece of fabric. In fact, let me tell you the measurements of the pockets I've just done. I've done it as a depth of 6.5 and a width of 10. Now I know 10 is too wide for the space available, but again, I'd rather cut it down. And all I'm going to do now is press this over. It has been interfaced just on half of it. Press it over, and like every other time before, we're going to sew 1 centimetre seam allowance, then we're going to pull it through like it's a sock, and we're going to iron it just as we did before, and then we can get ready to place it on this base piece of fabric. So that's all done. Now I'm sure you can guess what we're going to do next. Of course we're going to be top stitching this upper edge 2 rows at a stitch length of 3.5. When that's back, I'll then bring it over to this piece and I'm going to load it on top. I need to leave a good depth here to allow for some seam allowance later on, but that will be pinned into place. I'm not going to sew it just yet. I'm going to just pin it into place, hold my horses until I've done my flaps, so I can think about how I'm going to be subdividing, working those flaps in as well, because my brain has not reached that far just yet. So I'm just going to do my top stitching, place it, pin it, pause. That's been sewn, so now I'm just going to pin it, and then we're going to think about how on earth are we going to add some flaps to it? Need to get the thinking caps on, girl. And also, what fabrics are we going to use? Because this is a good opportunity for a bit of fun now. So I think we could have, do we have 3 small pockets or 2? I think we'll have 2. So what I'm going to do first, just as I've done before, when I'm just thinking things through, I'm going to measure and mark the midpoint. So at the minute it's 10 inches there. So I'm going to go in at my 5-inch marking. And I'm going to get my friction pen and I'm going to draw a line. Now, my friction pen will not show, will it? Let's use a blue pen. And let me just quickly check it is a friction pen. Iron off and rub off. There we go. And then we can just draw a line. That's where we're working to. So we also have to take into consideration we're going to have some seam allowances. Now, we already know this is not going to fit on the panel. So the flap basically wants to sit 1 centimetre away from each of those edges. That's 3/8 of an inch, which is there. So we don't want it encroaching beyond that space. Let's turn it around and do the same on the other side. 1, 2, 3. So we want the flaps to sit inside this marking and inside this marking, and we don't want it coming over too far over here because we know it just won't fit in the seams. So let's be really cautious. I'm just going to do a 1-inch marking for now, and I'm just going to have a quick look by placing this now onto the fabric. The best way to do this now is to find the midpoint between the edge and this one. So let's measure it. 9.5. What's half of 9.5? My maths is not great. Half of 9 is 4.5. So it's 4 3/4. So 4 3/4 lined up. This is our midpoint there. Okay. So all I have to do is line up the midpoint there, the midpoint there. That's perfectly in place. And actually, I've only just gone over the edge, so it was a good job I checked that. So we're going to lose from there some seam allowance. So I think that is a good shout. So 1 inch in. So let me just draw my 1 inch there. Because there's nothing worse than having the flap, but then you can't sort of use it functionally because it's in its own way almost. So that's what we want. Lots of grid lines, but it'll all iron off later on. So what we're going to do is we're going to attach some flaps up here, and then just for ease and just so that we've got some continuity, I'm going to use that pink bias binding again, and I'm going to run it across the top edge to hide all raw edges, and it'll make it look quite nice and tidy. So let me go and choose my fabrics. So I cut out 2 pieces, and they are squares. They are 4 1/4 inches, and I applied my woven interface into the back, and then I pressed it in half. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a little bit of an interesting shape. So I'm going to get my marking pen. I'm going to get a ruler. I'm going to use a unnecessarily big ruler, and you would mark in normally, but I'm just going to eyeball this distance here. And I'm just going to move over, and that will be my sew line just there. I'm just thinking again as I go, and I've just quickly not changed my mind. I just want to adapt what I'm about to say, and that is I'm going to do it as a bigger angle. So let's measure him. What am I like? So let's measure 3/4 of an inch inwards, and then let's measure down by 1 1/2 inches. That's about where I was before actually. And then let's connect those lines, and you'll do this for both pieces. Now what we're going to do is we have to remember our seam allowance. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to sew down, and then at my 1 centimetre seam allowance I will actually come down like so, and then I'm going to trim all this away as excess. So this will come down something like that, and then we'll be able to turn it through. So let me do that again now, just for ease. I'm just going to turn that around and use it as markings like so. There's that and that, that and that, that and that. Join them up, and then I will reduce my stitch length on this as well down to something like a 2.2, just because it's a small stitch area and we're going to need it to be strong whilst we're working with it. So I'm going to go ahead and sew those two areas now and then trim them back. So I take my stitch length down to a 2.2, going to reverse at the start to lock it in, work my way down to my seam allowance, and then I'm going to come down, reverse, and then I'm going to rotate and do it on the same on this side. And then when I've done them both, I will then be able to cut them down to reduce all of that extra fabric, like so. And then this will turn through to make a very lovely flap. Then I will be taking it to the iron to iron it nice and flat, pushing out all these little edges, rolling them out as I go, and then I will top stitch all the way around. Look, so they look fantastic. I think they are just so cute. And the fit is perfect. If you look at the lines that I made of where I want them to fit within, I couldn't have planned that. There's no way I could have planned that. So what I need to do next is a couple of things. One, we're going to need another lining to make sure that we lay these in and sew them in exactly the right spot. So they look to be in the right area now. We need to have overlap here so that we can get those cam snaps in. So let's just measure. We've got 2 inches there, 2.5 there. That looks about right to me. Let's draw a line. Sewing is all about just drawing lines, I swear down is. Okay, so we're going to place that centrally and we need to find the midpoint. So if I just fold this in half instead, it'll give me a little crease line there. Do the same on this one. Just get the little crease line and draw it. And then all we need to do is we will place it like so, and then we're going to get our cam snaps out. So now we need to choose some colours. I love working with cam snaps. Now, had I got teal, I would have gone that way, but I do not. This is a shame. We have so many options, so many lovely options. I actually really like that colour. Let me pull in another colour. So we've got a darker blue, because obviously they all just kind of go. Everything works in this. I don't know. I really like that paler blue one. I think I'm going to go with that and hope I make a right choice. So for each set, we need 2 domes. So 1, 2, 1, 2. Sound like I'm checking out a speaker there, don't I? And then we're going to need a female and a male. So a female and a male, and then we have got a female and a male, if I can get it out. There. So that's what we want. Now it's just about placing it. So let me move this away. All we need to do is push it through. Push it through, wiggle it through, and the male piece will go through here. So the male has got the sticking out part to it. Place it over the top. Get your tool, and the dome rests in that black dome shape. Pop it in, give it a squeeze. That's part 1 done. Let's do the same on here. And I'm just going to eyeball it and hope we're getting it in the right place. So again, we just squish it through, We're going for the male piece, in and resting in the black cap, and we're in. Now all we need to do now is get the right spot into the pocket. Now admittedly I think I should have done that a little bit lower, these pieces lower, not the flat, but it's a one-time thing. I can bring it down a little bit. In fact, let's do that. It doesn't matter, so I'm just going to bring it down like not much at all, 1/4 of an inch, and let's have a new line because I want it to be right. All I'm going to do now is replace this on the new line, and I'm just going to take a peek underneath and I'm going to draw where it needs to go. Do the same on this one. I'm not going to take it for granted it's in exactly the same spot. Peek and draw. There we go. Now we're going to take our remaining disc piece and push it through until we can feel it come through that little hole there. There she comes. Then we're going to put the female piece on top, and that'll get a squish. So we're in, and then repeat on this side. And give it a squish. So that's done. So all we now need to do is sew the flap in and hide away any raw edges, and then we need to sew down the middle to subdivide the two pockets so it's not one big pocket, and then we need to base it in on the sides and sew the bottom in. Before we do that, what we need to do, or we can take this and do this after, is we're going to actually wrap these into some bias binding just like we did earlier on today. So I'm going to take a piece of binding that is wider than what we need again. Always easy to work with it when it is wider, and then I'm just going to trim that down, and then I will iron it in half just like we did before, making it a bit easier to work with. So I'll go do that now. So that's all done, but I can't just sew it in. I need to make sure we've got the right distance between. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to tuck it in. And again, you can use that tape that we used earlier on today if you want to stop things sliding around. But we're going to tuck it in, hold it and pin. And then I'm going to place it where I want it so we know it's in exactly the right spot all of the time. And then I'm going to tuck this other little fella in, making sure it is in exactly the right spot. So I'm looking for the distance between these two pieces here, and then when I'm satisfied and happy, we're going to pin it and hold it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a continuous piece of sewing along the bottom edge of the binding, not the top. We're going to do that in a minute. We're going to do the bottom first, then we'll bring it back, we'll snap it into position, and then we'll do the top. So we've got quite a bit of sewing to do now. We're going to start off by getting this panel in and then going and sewing the bottom edge of this piece in. Okay, so we've done all of that. So now, as mentioned, I'm just going to, let me take those pins out. We will need to iron this to remove all the pen marks, but I'm just going to pop this into place so we know it's in position. And that's our line that we wanted before. Now, like I mentioned before, you can use tape if you wish to do so, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to use some pins just to temporarily hold. And then I'm just going to top stitch this upper edge to keep this all in place. And then our two popper pockets are done, and we can go ahead and complete this one, which is the slip pocket. So here's my pocket, but now it needs to be lined so that this is a usable space like this pocket is too. So I've cut another piece of fabric. This doesn't need interfacing because it's the lining and that piece already has been done. And I'm going to place this right side to right side. And this time we're going to be sewing the top edge and the bottom edge. But what I need to be really mindful of this time is that I get the seam allowance so that when it's turned through and finished, it falls exactly the same depth as the piece to its right hand side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of prep work. And by getting a few pins in both sides first, and then we're going to draw some lines, which I hope will help things. If it's a little bit out, honestly, it's really going to be neither here nor there. My mum always says a blind man would be happy to see that, Lucy. But we do our best anyway. Right, so let's bring that down so we can have it all in view there. So, I didn't do that very well, did I? So, at the minute it's rather deep, you see. We want the stitch line to run in line with this top edge here. So I'm going to get my ruler and I'm going to draw it. I'm going to draw my stitch line thereabouts, and then I'm going to do the same on the bottom. So I'm going to line it up so that this edge here runs across, and then I'm going to draw it. So now I've got a couple of lines for me to sew, and then we'll turn it through and see if we got that right or not. My machine has worked so hard today. It's only what you might expect from a machine like this though. I was very kindly gifted this machine by Janome a couple of years ago when I started out with this business here. And it's been an absolute babe, if we can call a machine a babe. It is the MC9480QC. It's a bit of an all singing, all dancing kind of machine. You'll see I've had my walking foot on all day. But it's a very narrow one. Just gives me some additional stability whilst I'm working. So this time I'm going to turn it through like it's a sock, but we are going to have those seam allowances, the stitch lines, so they run to the top and the bottom. And actually, if I got it slightly wrong and we see a tiny peep of this, it wouldn't be so bad at all because it looks pretty damn cute. Let's go and have a look. So what I've done is I've turned it through and I've given it a press, and now I'm just going to line it up to see. Oh, look at that. Spot on. So that trick worked, didn't it? It's ever so slightly out, but it's really not going to spoil or notice. So we need to top stitch this edge twice like we have done on this side, and this end is going to need sewing as well. But what we need to do before is tidy up these edges by inserting some bias binding again. Now what I'm going to need to do is unpick a little bit of this area here and here so that I can push it underneath and tuck it away when we get there. So I've got my binding, I've pinned this in place, and I've unpicked this top area and this bottom area here. And now all I'm going to do is carefully place this so it covers all the raggedy ends. So the best thing I can do is give myself a bit of support by adding some tape in for it to cling to a little bit. And I might need a couple of rows adding of this. We'll see how we go. Let's see how we get on. There we go. There we go. And I can place that over there evenly. Get rid of all those little bits as we go. And then this will tuck underneath. We're going to try and get it so it wraps underneath both of them. Never to be seen again. That's the aim anyway. It would have been tidier if I'd not sewn that bit in the first place, but as mentioned at the start, we are designing on the go with this, and I don't think we've done too badly personally. Oh, I might have gone too short with that now, not to worry. So we're going to get that all sewn into place. It's going to be a bit of a fiddle and a clap, but that's what it'll look like. So the front of the bag is now all done. So what we're going to do now is just give it a little bit of interest down these bottom corners, because it doesn't need to be square. It'll make it look quite hard, I think. So at the start I showed you that I got this tool, and it's for doing corners basically. And I'm going to choose this 3.3 inch radius, and all I do is I line it up so that the bottom edge and the side edge meet, and then get a pen and draw that shape. And then I can just get my scissors and cut that away. Then I can move it over, flip the ruler, and it will be exactly the same on both sides. And if I wanted to, I can do the same on that upper edge as well, which I might well do, but it will have to be much more gentle. As I pull this down, I've brought my hanger in that I started off with, and I'd be happy if it sort of fits like that really. But we don't want to lose too much depth here now really, and I don't want the corner to eat away. So if I did a big corner like this, can you see it would go down into the pockets, and I don't want that. That's ugly. So I'm going to go to my smallest corner, which is this one here, which is 2.5, and if I lay that in, can you see that will work, and it still doesn't quite meet the shoulders of that. So that would be appropriate for me to do at this point. So I'm just going to draw that one in, and then I shall trim it away, flip it, and do the same over here. And then we can start thinking about that back panel and how this is all going to be bound together and completed. I've been trying to think about how I'm going to finish this upper edge without leaving any raw edges. I could have done it so there was a turn-in method where there would still be raw edges, but because this teal frays a little bit, I really don't want to risk any of it escaping. So what I'm going to do is, on the front piece and on the back piece, I'm going to take some of my binding again, and I'm just going to apply it from each of the inner curves, just those short edges, and I'm just going to stitch it into place just to finish that upper edge off. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to get my back panel of this, fuse it to its foam again, think about whether I want to do any design work on it or just leave it blank, and then I'm going to sew these panels together. This is feeling very experimental, what I'm about to do, so hopefully it's going to work. I'm just going to ease it into place as I go. We don't need to worry about our ends, the short ends, because they're going to get encased later on. So I have fused that back panel to the teal and just done some random lines just to get it in place, and then I've laid the outer piece we've been working on top. And what I now want to do is cut all the way around it as though to trace it. Now you may want to pin first, but this will do me for now, just to work around cutting it all down. And then we're going to go to the upper edge, and just like before, we're going to add some binding to the top edge to conceal any raw edges that we might have. So just work all of our way around. So I've done that upper edge to match the other one, and now what we need to do is sandwich everything together. So it all needs to be wrong sides to wrong sides. Make sure you've got no pins hanging around, and we need to be lining everything up now. And when it's lined up, add some clips just to hold it and get it secure. It needs to be perfect now. We're on the finishing touches and it's got to be right, else we'd have to ask ourselves, what was it all about? So clip all the way around, and then when it's clipped all the way around, we're going to be doing some sewing, but we do need to leave some space for our hanging device to go in. So that's all clipped together, and it's going to be sewn, basted in a couple of millimetres in from the edges all the way around. But this top edge, we need space so that whatever hanging device we're going to put in, we're going to be able to slip it in. So for example, this might go in long ways, and then we'll wiggle it around and then it'll go in. So we need to stop sewing at a given point. So where do we think that's going to be? Bit of a gamble, but I'm going to go in the region of there. So I'm going to start sewing there, and I'm going to finish sewing there. And in fact, we can probably have a go at making sure it fits now. Just by going in, get the hanger in, you smoosh it in, you get it to go down, and then you'd wiggle it around because your hand would go in there quite easily. And then we can have a ta-da in a minute. Ta-da! That's how it will go. Or whatever object you're using to make it hang. So that is how we will be doing this. So we're going to start sewing here. We're going to base sew it all the way around. And then when that's done, we're going to come in and we're going to add binding all the way around. And we're going to... So I've put a really long stitch on now just to hold these layers together. And I'm going to do some reversing just to get it started. And start working our way around. So I did run out of bobbin. Some things we never learn, do we? Right, okay, so we're on to the final sew. Now we're going to bind all the way around the edges, and we're going to be starting from this point up here and finishing at this point just up here. This time though, I am going to be machine stitching from the top, flipping to the wrong side, and then I'm going to take this home and I'm going to hand sew it. So the way we're going to do that is we're just going to fold this piece in just like so. And then I'm going to line it up. Whoops. I'm going to line it up with this top edge. And I'm going to pin. I'm not really one for pinning binding into place before I actually do it, but I am going to do just this bit because I want to make sure that my stitch line falls just beneath that previous lot of binding. So I will just pin when I get to the curves, that's all. I'll just work all my way around, sew this into place, and then like I say, I'm going to iron it, flip it to the other side, pin it and hand stitch it when I have a bit of time later on under some good light. So there we go. I shall just take this to the machine now and start sewing, and I will work off the roll of the binding. I did it. I made the hanger organizer tidier of, I'm hoping, Elisha's dreams, even if it's not yours. I've worked on this all day. This is a combination of about 5 hours work, I would say, whilst recording as well. I can hand on heart tell you I did not plan any of this in advance. This is entirely based on just a couple of things. The size of the hanger, my decision that I really wanted to use the vinyl, and that was it. They were the only prerequisites that I had in my mind, other than watching Elisha's video and thinking, I think we can do something a bit nicer here, something a bit more special. I think she's worthy of it. That was all I had in my head. I am beyond happy with this. I want one. I'm now thinking, is this waiting to be a pattern release on TV or on my website? I don't know. I think there's definitely legs in it, and I think crafters will love this. I'm holding this up thinking, gosh, do you know what? I think I should have put a big eyelet in here, and then if I had a big eyelet, which I can do, It could go up, clip over the hanger, and it could even fold away. Oh, I'm gonna do that. So the video's done now, so I'm not gonna go back, but I will make sure I share some pictures when I've done that, because I think that will look pretty stunning. And then it can be like on the go too. So if Eleisha wants to sew outside and she needs all of her bits and bobs, she can just take it off her wall if she's using the hanger system, fold it up to keep it together, and then just take it outside and work on a porch like I know she likes to do. The Anna Maria fabric has been stunning to work with, and it's not the first time I've used this fabric, because I have also designed another pattern called the Jazz Bag that I just quickly want to mention to you, because that is being released on TV in, where are we now? We're recording on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday 9 o'clock in the morning on Sewing Street TV. You can watch back on YouTube. But I will be releasing 2 new patterns. One's called Kill Bowie and one's called the Jazz Bag. And I'm going to show you the Jazz now because matchy matchy. Here we go. I co-designed this one with my colleague Donna, but it is again perfect for crafters. You can open it up and you've got all your bits and bobs in there. Eleisha, this is yours. It makes sense that you have this because then it will go with your bag and you can take that out with you as well. I hope you enjoy it with all of my love. So if you guys have enjoyed what I've been up to today, please do consider giving my channel a like and subscribe for hints, tips, tricks, all things sewing related. I do talk knitting there, but knitting is very much my hobby and passion, while sewing has very much become my world of design and job, and everything I do is to teach. There is a YouTube video for the Jazz Bag. It should be live by the time that you are watching it. Watching this, should I say. So if you are interested in jazz, you can go on and watch that. And it'd be lovely to have your company there. In the meantime, thank you for sticking with me today. Thank you once again, Eleisha, for allowing me to do this for you. It's going to be in the post ASAP. And thank you for being with me in my little corner of the sewing world. Take care. Bye-bye.